tonight's class is going to be on the anatomy of a trigger. All right. And why this is important is because people know when they get triggered and they like to put labels on the trigger and they've got all these different stories and ideas around it, but people don't actually they find it very difficult to transform any of that. Okay. And they don't really know what to do with it. And 99% of the time, people don't actually know what they're getting triggered by. They just know it'll be somebody says something, somebody does something in a certain way and everything like that, but they have a hard time describing it outside of using a bunch of labels. Okay. And we'll deconstruct that and I'll expand on that idea so you actually know what it is. By the end of this, you should know how to, when you're triggered, deconstruct it so you actually know what you're reacting to. Because when you know what you're reacting to, that's when you can start to make things shift. If you don't, you stay in vague, generalized labels and they don't do anything. So, have any of you guys ever reacted to somebody really close to you? Like they've done something and you've had a reaction. Yeah. And you were sure you were right as well, by the way. You've reacted, they've done something, and you're sure you're right. So let's say this is a classic one. Um, you come home and you watch your partner cook something and not do the dishes afterwards. Okay. And straight, has anyone ever seen that and become reactive to that? I've caught a few sparks on this one myself. Now, straight away, you're watching them do this, straight away, where does your mind go? Oh my God, they're a slob. They don't care. I always have to, and now I always have to do everything because they're not doing the cleaning. Okay. Does that make sense? See that? You can picture that in your mind. Now, if you ask them, they've got a completely different view. So they're thinking, it's just a dish. It's not a big deal. Okay. And then they start labeling the other person, they start judging the other person for their reaction. They're fucking crazy. The yelling partner. What actually happened though? The dishes weren't done. Everything else is the meaning that was assigned to that. And that's what everyone's reacting to. Okay, so that's the hint. It's the meaning that's assigned to the action. That's what you're reacting to. Because those two people in that example have a completely different perspective and they have a completely different reaction to that same action. Make sense? So you look at what, so again, so you look at what happened there. The dishes weren't done. That's an event. But your mind didn't stay there. It jumped straight into the label. That label is the first distortion. Because when we start using labels, we use labels instead of looking at specific behaviors. And the problem with that is that you can't change something that you haven't clearly defined. So here's the first rule. If you can't describe the actual action when you're triggered, what they physically did, if you're having a trigger as a response to somebody, if you can't describe the actual action, what they physically did, then you're stuck in a label. If all you can say, as an example here, if all you can say is they're disrespectful, we've all met somebody that we've labeled as disrespectful at some point, surely. I've met plenty of people. I used to say that about my coaches in footy all the time. Okay, but that label doesn't help you because it doesn't tell you what happened. So you go to the moment. So what actually helps is go to the moment where they did something that you've labeled disrespectful and identify what you actually saw them do. What did you observe? So in this example, disrespectful could become they interrupted me mid-sentence. So they cut me off when I was talking. They interrupted me mid-sentence. They spoke over the top of me. whatever language you want to use, they called me a name that I didn't appreciate. When I asked them for clarification, they didn't respond. Or you could have sent them a text message asking them a question and they didn't respond. And so you've labeled that as disrespectful, or they didn't respond in a timely manner. You've labeled that as a disrespect because it might be something that you've a question that might be important to you. Okay, does that make sense? So you want to take the label and you want to find out what they did. Do you notice the difference in that? One is a label, they're disrespectful. The other is an observable behavior. It's a layer beneath. And this is, now I'll talk about this. I'll return to this later because there's something that comes into that as well. Is the other more curious?
Yeah, I mean, is the
No.
other one, so is the other, so the first one is more like you're you're kind of accusing, but is the other kind of view more like you're looking at a more curious angle, like why is that person behaving like that, or why is that perception
The first one is
happening?
a judgment.
Yeah.
So you've judged the person's done an action and you've judged it as a something.
Uh-huh.
So this person's done an action, which is spoken over the top of you, for example, or they've
Uh-huh.
interrupted you mid-sentence. Okay, so that's the action they've done.
Yeah.
You have labeled that disrespectful. So that's a judgment. You're judging the action. So if I just take your word, but that person who cut you off might not call it disrespectful. They might not even be intending that. So they're going to have a completely different perspective. So if I take you at your word and just take it as a disrespectful, okay, that's a disrespectful person
Yeah.
without getting at the content of what you've labeled disrespectful, we can't make any kind of emotional shift around that person because we don't know what we're working with. And you will remain blind to what you're actually triggered by. So how do you do
Oh,
the inner?
okay, sorry.
So
Yeah,
you're unable to do the accurate inner reflection to find out where that trigger even came from.
got it.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. So this is why people stay stuck in those same reactions, because when you use the label, you're no longer describing what happened, you're judging it. And what you judge is always really the same thing. Okay, so this is an important nuance to judgment. Someone either did too much of something or not enough of something based on what you expected. Because if they meet your expectation, there's no problem. You don't judge it. So in this instance, if we extend that metaphor, the person interrupted you. Okay. You had an expectation that when you speak, somebody doesn't, somebody remains silent. Okay. So you have an expectation that they remain silent unless you invite them into the conversation. Whatever it is, you had an expectation. Okay. So that person was talking too much when they interrupted you, or not listening enough when they interrupted you. Notice that? It's either too much of something or not enough of something. But if you expected them to interrupt you mid-sentence, or you set a context and said, it's okay if you interrupt me mid-sentence, when they did it, they'd just be meeting your expectation. And so you wouldn't have a reaction, you wouldn't judge it. Did that make sense for everyone? So if you can write that down, that's a very powerful note to make. That what you judge in someone is they did too much of something or not enough based on what you expect. And is it possible that some people walk around with unrealistic expectations that they place on the world and people around them? And when the world and people around them don't meet their expectations, they become really reactive quite easily. This is, you have the power to shift your perceptions, and that will change the way that you respond to the world. So just a few examples here. She's inconsiderate is a label. Go to a moment when she's being inconsiderate. What does she do that you have labeled inconsiderate? She was checking her phone while I was talking. That's a behavior. What was your expectation? That she makes eye contact with me the whole time while I'm talking to her. I mean, part of you can even see this. Notice how opens up a lot of gateways to reflection. You can ask yourself a question: is that a realistic expectation that people are going to make constant eye contact with you the whole time when they're speaking with you? I don't know. I remember there was with this example, I dated a girl who used to work in the nightclub industry, and she had a mobile phone that the club gives you. And on the weekend, because she has to book in tables and all that kind of stuff, on the weekend, she was the thing was vibrating nonstop. So you're having a conversation with her, and then the phone would ring, and then she has to address it. Okay. Now, I didn't think she was inconsiderate, but if I'm on a date with Mo and I'm telling him I'm opening my heart to you, Mo, and I'm having this conversation. I'm trying to tell you about my feelings, and then your phone rings, and then you just sit there like playing around on Instagram when I'm about to tell you that I love you. I might call that inconsiderate. But because, see, with my ex-girlfriend, I didn't have an expectation. My expectation was that when that phone rang, that she would have to address it. So I didn't actually, it was annoying, but I didn't judge her for it. It's just an annoying part of her job. Can you see again the way that I'm perceiving that? It's the same action in a different context. It's going to mean something different. Another label, he was abusive. Okay, so you'll hear that he or she was abusive. You'll hear that often. Um, what did they do that you've labeled as abusive? Okay, he raised his voice and called me names that I didn't appreciate. All right, great. So what was your expectation? That he always speak with you in a measured tone of voice? Is that a little bit unrealistic that someone would only ever speak with you in a measured tone of voice? That they won't have a spectrum of tonality? There's a certain part to that. But if we just stay at the level of abusive at the label, you can't work with that because these labels are subjective. So we need to go from what's subjective, which is a label, to what's objective, which is the behavior. So once you get past the label, there really is two things going on. Okay, you can really boil it down to these things. It's what they did and what you made it mean. That's what it really boils down to. And people are reacting. You guys are reacting to the meaning you give behavior, not the behavior itself. And this is why, as I touched on before, in a different context, the same behavior will get a completely different response from you. So if someone interrupts you in one context, that's rude. In another, say if the building's on fire, it could save your life. You don't want someone to let you finish talking if the building's on fire. Just let me finish this thought. You want them to cut you off, go, David, get out of here. You know what I mean? So if the meaning of behavior was universal, we would all react to the same way to the same things, but we don't. Two people can watch the same movie, they can watch the same behavior, and they can have a completely different reaction. So it's why? It's because it's the way that you interpret it. It's your perceptions that are governing your response. Just take a look at the news. Take a look at the news. and social media, at the whole spectrum of reactions to a post. I could put up a post to be the smartest, dumbest guy there is. I get DMs telling me I'm incredibly intelligent and insightful, and other ones saying, "Go, David, you know that's very dangerous for you to have that opinion." I'm dangerous and dumb and smart and all the things based on the same piece of content. So that's why most judgments really are just misinterpretations. You're projecting your own values, your assumptions, and your expectations onto life, onto what's happened, onto people. And that's the lens that you filter your reality through. So you don't actually, when you're judging, you're not seeing things objectively. And objectivity means being able to see both sides. So I've worked with people that have had moments that they've labeled abuse. And when they spoke to the therapist and everything like that, they were operating on the level of the label when they were working with them. And when I said, okay, so what was going on that you labeled abuse? I had one client who had had sexual moments when she was younger with another little girl, and she had labeled it as abuse from the other girl. I go, well, how old were you? Well, they were both the same age. I go, okay. And so for years, she had this label of this was abuse, abusive, abusive, abusive. But when we go, well, what did she do, and what did you do, and what was going on here? When she could see what she actually did, and she could see what she was judging, all of a sudden we could ask different questions, and those questions showed her her motivation for actually being in the situation she was in, how it was serving her. And what was revealed was the fact that she just had a bunch of shame around it. But it was more palatable to her psyche to label it as abuse rather than see it as a series of events that she willingly took part in with somebody her same age. And so that, people can have all their own moral objections to that, but I'm not here for people's moral objections. I'm here to try and help somebody set themselves free and help them to stop judging themselves. And that was a very impactful scenario for her, because you realized, again, the label changed as soon as the information was updated. She stopped judging it. The judgment was gone. It was very powerful for her because it opened her up for relationships again. You'd be surprised when people, if whenever, just as a little sidebar to this, whenever somebody says they want a relationship, because it's so common, but they haven't been in a relationship for a number of years, it's because they've got unconscious motives to stay out of a relationship. And it's usually because they've got all these unresolved judgments from previous relationships that have built up, that haven't been resolved, that are now creating a shutdown response within the body. You're firing off your survival brain, avoidant, to avoid it. And that's important. So it's wise to be able to go in and explore these judgments and find out what it is that you're actually triggered by, and to really get them from subjective to objective to the actual behavior, because that's when you can start to own the behavior. That's when you can start to see the benefit of the behavior. When I was working with that lady, if I just said, what's the benefit of abuse? That doesn't make any sense. But when we broke down the behavior and said, what was the benefit that you were deriving from this specific behavior? I don't want to get into too many details for her, but this specific behavior. And she's like going, well, it satisfied her curiosity. It actually was a safe space for her to explore things that she'd been thinking about with somebody who was a friend, the same age and everything like that. She was actually seeing how all of this was actually, this particular behavior was actually serving her, and why she was taking part of it. And when she could actually see that in the moment, she could see the context of her life, boom, she gets back in her heart, the trigger dissolves. See what I mean? So you want to get beyond labels. Labels are just an entry point for you. That's all. That's what they're good for, an entry point to asking a deeper question. So you don't judge yourself if you label things, just ask a deeper question. Okay, so I don't want to go too far from a tangent. Sometimes I do, but I don't think it was too far away off tangent. That they kind of described a bit of what's going on. Okay, so here's a part that this is what we talk about here. We don't want to get this mixed up. This is really important, okay? Because otherwise you'll keep calling something a problem without knowing what it actually is, okay? So this is something important. There are three types of things that you can judge. All right, so you've got a trait. What a trait actually is something that you can see on somebody. So it doesn't actually require a behavior. So a trait could be something physical. So it could be eyes. It could be someone's teeth. It could be someone's hair. It's something in their body, something on their body, on the physicality. Okay, now, how many guys have seen something physical on someone and had a judgment on it? Maybe, I know if any of you guys have ever kissed someone with bad breath and had a judgment on it. Yeah, someone with a sleepy eye. I don't know. Like there's certain things that we can see and we can have a judgment on. Okay, again, it's good to get clear on that. So sometimes what you're judging in people is just a physical trait. But most of the time, I'd say it's about 10 to 15% of the time, maybe closer to 10%. It depends. It's about 10% of the time, it's going to be a physical trait. But most of the rest of the time, I'd say 80 to 90%, it's going to be an action or an inaction. Okay, so so you got the trait, the physical trait, the action that they did too much of, or an inaction, something they didn't do, not enough of. There was a recent post when the Bondi shooting happened, and I actually did a video on this, was that a lady was putting up some social media posts that were labeled tone deaf, but she said she was praising the action of the person who jumped. There was a person who jumped in when the shooters were doing their thing, and he wrestled the gun off one of the shooters. And this lady wrote a post and said, okay, that she was praising him for his action, but she was also saying, oh, no, of course it was a Lebanese man who did it. He wasn't Lebanese, but that was what she wrote. She called him a Lebo. He's actually Palestinian. She goes, of course, a Lebo jumped in to try and save the day because no Australian men would have the balls to do that. So she's got, in that moment, she's judging the inaction that she perceives of Australian men in her perception in that moment. Now, that you can just imagine the kind of response she got. She made it onto the into a newspaper. So I think it got a little bit blown out of proportion, her comments, but again, her judgment also sparked a lot of judgment. So people started judging her and they start labeling her. So her getting triggered, speaking out about that trigger also triggered other people. So that if I was working with all these people, I go, what has she said that's firing off in you? Interesting. So just remember, most of the time it's a behavior, but sometimes it's a mixture of both. You could be, someone could have bad breath, and you can say, I'm also judging them because they've got bad breath, and that I've made that mean that they don't brush their teeth. And so it can be a little bit of a composite, but I don't want to go too far into that because it can get confusing. Okay, so that's how we want to be able to break it down into the objective behavior. So let's play around with this. Who's got something? Well, I want you all to just play around with this now. Go to what's somebody that who does something that you judge for it. Someone who does something that you dislike. We'll do it with dislike and like. So just write something down. Could be judgmental, could be rude, could be aggressive, could be arrogant. Just pick a person that can elicit that kind of response out of you. Okay, now go to a moment where you have seen them doing the thing that matches the label. So if you've got Donald Trump here and you're calling him arrogant, go to a moment when you've seen him being arrogant. Now, it could be you're watching a news report and the way that he spoke to a reporter or something. Go to the exact moment. And I want you to write down what they're doing, but write it down with objective language. Write it down the same way you would describe it to an alien who does not know what human behavior is. So if what you're saying about, say you say Donald Trump is arrogant the way that he addressed this reporter, he he has a tonality in his voice. You say, oh, he's being smug and arrogant in the way he addresses it. Okay, great. Explain that to an alien who has no idea what human behavior is, what Donald Trump is doing in that moment that you've labeled arrogant. He's responding to a question with a scrunched up face, a certain tonality, because a lot of the time it can be a tonality that you're seeing. And he's being verbally dismissive as in his response. And if you're having a reaction to what he's done, that's your trigger. Just as a little add-on, you can also judge people who do things. You're also judging people when they do things you like. If people do more than what you expect, they exceed your expectation. See, if they don't meet your expectation, you judge them. If they exceed your expectation, you judge them differently. You're just open to them. It's advantageous to you. So has everyone done this? Is anybody want to share? No volunteers. All right. All right. Everyone's shy. Well,
I mean, I'll share this one. I think just makes me self-reflect on the behavior of myself. I know I could also see where they do the right thing, and I do, but the one that I picked was just perception of like a clarity on the person's side about what was important at that moment, and then choosing to do something else, and then recognizing that I was just mirroring when I was distracted right at that moment, in my view, like earlier potentially,
what were
and
you labeling them as? What was the initial label?
distracted from priorities,
Okay.
inconsiderate of others along their plan.
Okay. So
Um,
inconsiderate.
yeah, like you're not considering the bigger picture here. Where involves more people. But then I know instantly where I do multiple times throughout the day, and that's
Okay. So
usually where
are
I'm
you
really
the other
stuck.
person? Are you the person that they're not considering?
Yeah.
Okay. So that in your perception, they're doing something that's inconsiderate because it's affecting you.
Hmm.
They're not considering you with their action. So go to the moment when you perceive this person as being inconsiderate. Now, it could be them doing the action. It could be them telling you about the action. It could be their reaction to something you're saying. What is it go to it could be, and it could be all three, but they're separate moments that we'd be working on. So just pick whatever it is that first jumps into your head.
Yeah, you already have.
Yep, cool. What did they do?
Um,
Go the
what
moment.
I'm home, but they're doing it. Tiff's leaving, right, to go home with Mia, and they're gonna be there for a couple of days. And it's gonna allow me to hyper focus on work, and a lot of the judgment when throughout the days, if like Tiff decides to go clean and I'm about to go to a meeting, and in my mind it's like, you're not prioritizing that I have a meeting right now and you can do this later. People are about to get here that can help you. So anyway, like you can see, like you derail, but at the end it's just inconsiderate of what I consider important for the family.
You're getting into the story of it though. Go to the moment that you perceive her being inconsiderate. What's she doing in that moment?
Cleaning.
So she's cleaning.
Yep. And Mia's screaming.
And Mia's screaming. So she's being inconsiderate to who in that moment, in your perception?
To me and Mia, because I cannot work with the noise, and Mia is now screaming and getting out of control, even further escalating.
Okay, so so she's cleaning, so Mia's screaming. What is it about that moment? Is it what's she doing in that moment? What does that mean?
That like I'm supposed to be at work and her mom's about to get here to help with the house, and she wants the house cleaned before they get here instead of using the help when they get here. So she's doing something that is not prioritizing what we had talked earlier.
She's allowing the kids, so she's cleaning instead of attending to Mia when she's screaming.
And allow me to work, yeah.
And that's affecting your work.
Yeah, because I'm working downstairs, right below it.
She's prioritizing the house over Mia, and that's affecting you.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. You see, just there, guys, it's gone from inconsiderate to she's cleaning the house while the kid's screaming. That's distracting me from work. Can you see the difference? One's based in the actual objective behaviors. The other one's just a label. If we don't ask now that we've got the content from Eddie, where she's prioritizing cleaning the house over attending to Mia, which is when Mia's crying and carrying on and stuff like that, and it's distracting. It's making it hard for Eddie to work. This is when we can start to look at, and we can refine that even further. But this is when Eddie can start to ask questions like, where do I prioritize something things at the expense of, instead of looking at Mia or something like that, that inconveniences other people, that is inconvenience someone else. Where have I prioritized things and it's distracted other people from doing what they want to do? See what I mean? Like when we can get to the level of behavior, Eddie could find a way to own that reflection. Then we can, because we understand the level of behavior, we could say, how is it serving Eddie that in that moment, Tiff is prioritizing cleaning the house over attending to Mia? And how is that serving Eddie? How's it serving everyone else? So we can start to ask more directed, focused questions, and that's how we actually balance the trigger. If he just tells me that his wife's inconsiderate and I just take him at his word, and we don't do any kind of investigation, see what I mean? Like she's just cleaning the house with the kids screaming. Paul could call that, if Paul's got a high value on having a house clean rather than kids screaming, Paul would say that she's actually focused, that she's prioritized everything properly. My ex-girlfriend would say that she's got her priorities straight because she wanted a hospital. She wanted to live in a fucking hospital. I'll never forget. You guys have heard me say it. Is it Tegan clean or is it David clean? Like going, shit. That means I didn't clean it properly. It means it's yeah. There's germs in her perception. See what I mean? So that one action could elicit so many different responses from people. Now, in addition, if Eddie's got a bunch of charges, unresolved charges on his wife, he's probably going to be a little bit less resilient to this. So it's wise to be able to look at these things and to ask more powerful questions to kind of bring that back into balance.
And the way that translated was nothing escalated because I knew that was just a moment. I just had to think about where that was reflecting within me. So then I just sat with Mia and I realized, okay, if this matters to me more, then I'm gonna go sit with Mia and do the work later. And that's okay. And that'll make me happy because that's a priority to me right now over work. So I went and do that. I let Tiff do what she needed to do. Then she said, thank you. And I said, I appreciate it. And then she said, you're good for the rest of the day. No need to worry. So like we always work it out, right? It's just that momentary spark. But I would say the biggest thing is the 4 doctors, I'd say. Right? The lack of sleep is where the spike of anger really kicks in. Those are such minor things. But then when you sleep, 3 hours, 4 hours, multiple days, that's just natural, right? So where everything comes together.
Just thinking about that.
Then don't have kids.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. I mean, I wouldn't not sleep forever if that's what it takes. She did her first little steps today, so.
Yeah. Oh, it's a little bit cute. That's a little bit cute. So guys, I hope that what we've shared today, just as a recap, is that the next time you react to somebody, stop. And you put a label on it, stop. Don't judge yourself for labeling, by the way. Labeling's fine. It's an entry. Just don't treat it as the final result. So just stop. Recognize that you're using a label and drop the label for a second. Ask yourself, what actually am I observing what's taken place? What did they do specifically? Can you ask, what have I made that mean? What meaning have I given that? Now you have the call. Now you've got something to use, and that's your work. I wanted to circle back just to one thought as well, where some of this can become a little bit tricky is when people tell us things have happened and tell us things about other people, and then we create a judgment on somebody based on somebody else's story. And people have their own motivations for telling people certain stories. That's why you'll never dissolve a trigger that's hearsay directly. So when we've got judgments on people that we didn't actually see do the thing that the other people are claiming, what we need to look at is explore some of the content. So we look at, what did the person say to us, and get some of that content. What are we reacting to within that content? And look for it in our own life and start to ask ourselves deeper questions. Because trust me, think about, can you guys see how there's so many distortions and different ways that we distort our experience, and we have all these different reactions. All of these reactions are going to influence the way that you respond and act in the world, right? Look at how many levels of distortion we've got here that stopped us from the truth. Labels, all these different things, they block us from seeing a clear reality. Now, if you've got one person who's got their own version of reality feeding you a story, and then you're interpreting that story through your own filters and your own reality, think about that. How much truth are we actually getting? We're getting a bunch of stories that are being filtered through everybody. So when people tell you things and it's having a big effect on you, it's wise to look at what the content is. Unless you saw the thing, I've seen people come up with all sorts of stories. Like I worked with somebody who was going through a divorce, and his ex-wife told the child protective services that he used to hit her, and he allowed her to do this, to say that, they discussed it beforehand because she needed to go into a shelter because she needed accommodation. She didn't work. So she needed accommodation. So he said, it's all right. If you need to say this so that you can get temporary accommodation for you and the kids, because they agreed to separate. Now, she's got her own motivations. So it didn't, not only did it start there, but then she turned it into this whole thing. She pushed it further. So you see, she started saying that he's abusing the kids and all this kind of stuff. Now the children want to live with him. It's not true, but she has her own motivations for saying these stories, and she's saying all these things about she's trying to say all these things to the children about their dad, and the kids don't believe her. She's saying all these things to the courts, and the courts are going through procedural things, but everything gets thrown out because there's no evidence of any of this stuff. It's all hearsay. But I shared this story to illustrate the point that people have their own perceptions of events and they superimpose them on those events. And if you base all your perceptions of people in reality on what other people are telling you without looking within, finding some answers for yourself and seeing through your own eyes, and you prioritize what everyone else is saying, then you can distort things. And that can be pretty destructive to your psychology over time. You don't see things clearly. So when you work with me, I'll make sure that what's hearsay and what's not. So I'll hold you accountable to that. But it's something worth investigating within yourself. How much of the judgments you've placed on people are from what you actually have perceived with your own two eyes, and what are the things that people have said? People have said all sorts of things about me when I was in high school and everything like that. Rumors. None of it, a lot of it not true. People have exaggerated stories. I'm sure some of your friends exaggerate stories as well. Sure, you guys have exaggerated stories. Or maybe not you guys. Maybe just me. All right. So that's the anatomy of a trigger. Does anybody have any questions, or has that brought up anything? Yeah, any questions, any realizations, anything that I'd like to share around that? No?
I think for me it's reinstating things that I'm aware of doing now. So I've come across a few examples where there's been gossip, especially in a little country town like in the UK, like this one. And I've been very aware of saying, well, I don't think it's like that, or maybe that's your perception, or that's where you're coming from. And it's kind of it feels a lot cleaner when you say things like that, because you're not carrying someone else's thoughts. So yeah, it just is running in line with things that I'm doing. So I'm really pleased.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, people are going to tell you a story that's going to be based on their own projections, their own values, and everything like that. So the information they actually share with you is filtered. It's not, the news is filtered. It's based on the value structures of the people running it, or whatever they want to do. Like, the information is always filtered through your values. So someone who is spreading a rumor, Katrina, it's because it's going to come, it's a filtered experience. It's their own judgments of whatever they think someone else has done or should have done or anything like that. It's a reflection of them. And then they're going to say that to you. So yeah, there's a lot of, we label ourselves with all of this as well, by the way. Everything I just mentioned to you now, you judge, this is also the anatomy of why and how you judge yourself. not just another person. So if you've got any labels that you have on within yourself, it's the same process. Go to a moment where you're displaying this thing that you've labeled as selfish or horrible or whatever it is. What did you actually do objectively? And then we get from label to objective behavior, and we apply it to the context that you're in and in your life. And that's when we have the gateway to asking questions that will actually balance your mind and that will open up your heart and will dissolve the self-judgment. I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom. All of this is what I do with
Keys to the
you
kingdom.
guys.
Woof.
This is without doubt the most impactful thing that I've learned is how to break down an actual reaction. What myself or someone else is actually reacting to. You will save yourself a lot of heartache if you really get this and you really apply it. It is powerful. It is powerful. And if you can hold yourself accountable to answering the questions, or if you allow me to, powerful.